Jake, a broken mechanic, boards a plane with his daughter. People ignore his dirty clothes and poor life. But when the plane has trouble and lands at an Air Force base, everyone discovers he's Eagle Eye, a legendary fighter pilot. The pilots respect him. His daughter sees who her dad really is. Everything changes in one day. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Jake Miller's hands were shaking as he buckled his 6-year-old daughter into seat 14C. Not from fear of flying, but from the weight of memories no one could see. The businessman in 14B looked at Jake's grease-stained work jacket and moved his briefcase closer, like dirt was contagious. That man had no idea these same hands once flew a fighter jet worth $90 million. Had no idea that Dirty Dad beside him was once called Eagle Eye by every pilot in the United States Air Force. But in 40 minutes, when their plane made an emergency landing at a military base, everyone was about to learn who they had been ignoring. "Dad, these seats are so soft," Emma whispered, pressing her small hand against the leather. Her eyes were wide with wonder. Jake knew why. Their apartment had furniture from thrift stores. These business-class seats cost more than their monthly rent. "Yeah, sweetie, pretty nice, right?" Jake managed a smile. The gate agent had given them a free upgrade. Veteran courtesy, she had said. But nothing about this felt like a gift. It felt like charity. It felt like pity. "Can I have the window seat?" Emma asked. "Of course, baby. You can watch the clouds." Jake helped her switch seats. Emma immediately pressed her face against the window, clutching her small toy airplane. It was old and scratched, missing one wheel. Jake had found it at a garage sale 2 years ago, the same week he had sold his Air Force jacket to pay for Emma's medicine. That jacket had his call sign embroidered on the chest, Eagle Eye. Now it belonged to someone else. The businessman settled into his seat with a loud sigh. He pulled out his phone and laptop, spreading his things across the armrest like he owned extra space. His suit probably cost more than Jake made in 3 months working at Peterson's Auto Repair. Jake wore jeans from Walmart and boots with worn soles. Under his fingernails, there were traces of motor oil that never quite washed out. He looked exactly like what he was, a man struggling to survive. The businessman glanced at him once, saw the oil stains, and looked away. Dismissed, invisible. Jake had learned to accept these looks. After he left the Air Force, the world had changed. People who once saluted him now stepped around him. People who once listened to his commands now avoided eye contact. A woman in a business suit took seat 14A. She had perfect hair and expensive jewelry. Her perfume was strong, the kind that announced, "I have money." She looked at Jake, then at Emma, then pulled out her phone like a shield. "Excuse me," she said to the flight attendant before even sitting down. "Is there any space in first class?" The flight attendant smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We're completely full today." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. She sat down like she was being punished. Jake focused on Emma. His daughter was making the toy airplane do loops above her lap, making soft whooshing sounds. The toy had been a gift from her mother, Rebecca, before the accident. Before the training flight that went wrong. Before Jake had been grounded with injuries and couldn't fly chase for her. Before he listened to her voice on the radio, calm and professional, even as her jet was dying around her. Before he became a single father who couldn't save the woman he loved. "Sir, can I get you something to drink before takeoff?" The flight attendant appeared with a warm smile. "Water is fine, thank you," Jake said quietly. "And for the little princess?" "Apple juice, please," Emma said, then added quickly, "Thank you, ma'am." The flight attendant's smile grew genuine. "Such good manners." "You're welcome, sweetheart. Children always got kindness." It was the fathers in dirty jackets who had to earn it. The businessman was on a phone call now, voice just loud enough to claim territory. No, I told them the contract needs revision. I don't care what the timeline is. We're not accepting substandard terms. These military contractors think they can dictate terms. They work for us. He talked about military people like they were servants. Like they were beneath him. Jake felt his jaw tighten. He knew men and women who served. Who sacrificed. Who missed birthdays and anniversaries and first steps because they were protecting people like this businessman. People who would never understand. Dad, is my plane too loud? Emma whispered suddenly. Jake looked at her. No, baby. Why? Emma's eyes flicked toward the woman in 14A. That lady looked annoyed. Jake's heart broke a little. His 6-year-old daughter had already learned to make herself smaller. To take up less space. To apologize for existing in places people thought she didn't belong. Your plane is perfect, Jake said firmly. You play however you want. But Emma had already lowered the toy to her lap, making it quieter. The flight attendant returned with drinks. The businessman got his in glass. Jake got his in plastic. Emma got a small cup with a lid. Small differences. But they communicated everything. The engines began their pre-flight whine. Jake knew this sound in his bones. Boeing 737-900. He had consulted on safety procedures for this exact aircraft model 4 years ago. It had been a 6-week contract that paid for Emma's preschool and 2 months of rent. Then it ended, and he was back to changing oil and rotating tires. The captain's voice came through the speakers. Folks, this is Captain Richards. We're cleared for takeoff. Flight time to Denver will be about 2 hours. Weather looks clear. Sit back, relax, and we'll have you there in no time. Jake listened to the voice. Military training, he could tell. The calm authority, the precise language. This captain had probably learned to fly in the Air Force, just like Jake. The plane pushed back from the gate. Emma's hand found Jake's, her small fingers squeezing tight. We're okay, baby, Jake said softly. Just like always. The 737 taxied toward the runway. Jake tracked every sound, every movement. His body remembered. The pre-flight checks, the wind calculations. The backup plans. Everything that went into putting a machine in the air and bringing it safely back down. They reached the runway. The engine spooled up, building to a roar. Emma pressed back into her seat, grinning. Here we go, Dad. The brakes released. The plane accelerated. Jake felt the speed building, the wings generating lift, the exact moment of rotation. The nose lifted. The ground fell away. They were flying. Phoenix disappeared below them, giving way to desert and sky. Jake used to own this space. Used to command it. Now he was just another passenger, watching the world he used to inhabit from the outside. Dad, Emma whispered. Do you think Mom can see us up here? The question hit Jake like a punch. Sharp. Unexpected. He swallowed hard. Love doesn't need height, Emma. She sees you always, from anywhere. The woman in 14A glanced over for just a second. Something flickered in her face. Maybe curiosity, maybe judgment. Then she returned to her phone. Jake felt her unspoken conclusion, single father. Dead wife, cheap clothes. Probably can't even afford this flight. She wasn't wrong about the last part. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The businessman immediately made another call. I'm reviewing the specs now. This is completely unacceptable. I don't care about Lockheed's reputation. If they can't meet our standards, they don't get the contract. He said, standards, like it was a weapon. We're talking about military equipment, not toys. Emma flinched. She pulled her airplane closer to her chest and stopped playing. Jake felt something crack inside. That careful control he always maintained. That determination to stay quiet and not cause problems. It fractured. His hand covered Emma's. "Your plane is perfect, baby. Don't let anyone tell you different." The woman in 14A heard. Her eyes flicked over. For half a second, something like awareness crossed her face. Then it vanished, replaced by the armor of importance. 20 minutes into the flight, the captain's voice returned. But something was different. Jake heard it immediately. That subtle tightness. That controlled tension of a pilot dealing with a problem. "Folks, we've got a minor technical situation here. Nothing to be alarmed about, but we're going to make a precautionary landing at Davis Air Force Base. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin." The cabin shifted. Passengers stirred. Pulled out phones. The woman in 14A's composure cracked. "Technical situation. What does that mean?" The flight attendant moved through the aisle with practiced calm. "Just a precaution, ma'am. Everything is under control." But Jake heard what she didn't say. Heard it in the captain's voice that I and the flight attendant's too careful reassurance. In the way the plane was already beginning a steeper descent than normal. This wasn't minor. This was serious enough to override standard procedures. Serious enough to make an emergency landing at a military installation instead of routing to a civilian airport. Hydraulics, maybe. Or engine trouble. Something that made continuing to Denver too risky. Jake's hands ached to reach for controls that weren't there. His mind was already running through emergency checklists, calculating scenarios, preparing for outcomes. "Dad," Emma's voice was scared now. "Is everything okay?" Jake smoothed the fear from his face. Put on the calm he had learned in the cockpit. The unshakable steady that made terrified crew members believe they would survive. "Everything is fine, sweetheart. We're just taking a different path. Like when we take the back roads home." Emma nodded. She trusted Dad completely. The way 6-year-olds do. The woman in 14A was gripping her armrest, knuckles white. All that importance, all that authority, meaningless in the face of physics and mechanical failure. For just a moment, she was human. Scared, vulnerable. The descent steepened. Jake felt the pilot working harder than he should. Fighting something, compensating. The engine sounded wrong. Not catastrophic, but wrong enough. Other passengers didn't notice. But Jake did. Every sound, every vibration, every adjustment telegraphed the problem to someone who understood the language. The businessman was texting frantically. 2 rows back, someone was crying quietly. Emma pressed against Jake's side. "Dad, I'm scared." "I know, baby." Jake wrapped his arm around her. "But the pilots know what they're doing. They train for this. We're going to be fine." He made his voice certain. Absolute. Even though his own heart was racing. Even though memories of Rebecca's last flight were screaming in his head. The ground was rushing up now. Arizona desert visible through the window. And there it was. Davis Air Force Base. Jake felt something shift in his chest. A door he had kept locked for 4 years was rattling on its hinges. This was his world. The world he had walked away from. The world that had decided he was no longer fit for it. "Look, Emma," he pointed out the window. "See those buildings? That's an Air Force base." Emma's fear was momentarily replaced by wonder. "Really? Really? See those planes on the runway? Those are F-22s. Real ones. The hangars, the maintenance facilities, the control tower, the precise geometry of military infrastructure. Jake knew every inch of places like this. Had lived in them, had belonged to them. The wheels touched down hard. Harder than a normal landing, but controlled. The pilot had fought for it and won. The plane decelerated. Reverse thrust whining. Emergency vehicles flanking them just in case. Applause broke out. That nervous relief of people who had been afraid without admitting it. Jake didn't clap. He was cataloging every sound, every sensation, running post-flight checklists his brain couldn't forget. The woman in 14A opened her eyes. Color was returning to her face. The moment of vulnerability was already closing. The plane came to a stop. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The captain's voice returned, relief audible now. "Well folks, we're safely on the ground at Davis AFB. Maintenance will need to inspect the aircraft. You're welcome to deplane and wait in the passenger terminal. We'll keep you updated." Passengers were already standing, grabbing bags, complaining about delays and missed connections. The woman was on her phone before her seatbelt was off. "I need you to reschedule everything. I don't know how long. Just do it." Her fear had lasted maybe 30 seconds. Now she was back to being important. Jake helped Emma gather her things. The toy airplane, her small backpack, the half-eaten snacks. They filed toward the exit. Jake moved slowly, reluctant in a way he couldn't name. Being back on a military installation felt like visiting his own grave. Like walking through a life that had belonged to someone else. They stepped into Arizona sun. Heat hit like a physical force. The tarmac shimmered. The smell of jet fuel was immediate and overwhelming. Jake inhaled deeply. That smell. It was muscle memory. It was home. "Dad, those planes are so cool." Emma pointed. Jake looked where she was pointing. Four F-22s sat in various stages of maintenance. Ground crews swarming them, pilots probably inside, prepping for training flights. His throat tightened. Those were his planes. His world, his language. And he was just a tourist now. Just another passenger in worn boots, watching from the outside. They filed into the terminal. Basic, functional. Metal chairs, vending machines, windows overlooking the flight line. The woman claimed prime space immediately. Near the outlets, creating a perimeter with her luggage and laptop. Jake found a quiet corner where Emma could play without bothering anyone. Where he could sit with his back to the wall and watch the world he used to know move forward without him. Emma pulled out her airplane. Started creating missions on the floor, soft sound effects, careful not to be too loud. An hour passed. Then 90 minutes. The woman's phone calls increased in volume. She had positioned herself as the unofficial spokesperson for passenger grievances. Demanding updates from personnel who had no authority to give them. "I have meetings I cannot miss," she announced to anyone listening. "This is completely unacceptable." Jake watched this performance with detachment. He had seen actual emergencies. Real crises, where calm and competence mattered more than volume. Emma had abandoned her toy for the windows. Pressing her hands against glass, watching an F-22 crew work with choreographed precision. Jake stood beside her. He couldn't help himself. His attention was captured by details he couldn't stop cataloging. The stabilizer angles. The weapons bay check. The intake inspection, every movement purposeful. "That's the coolest plane ever, Dad," Emma's voice was pure wonder. Jake smiled despite everything. "Yeah, baby. It really is." Behind them, the woman's latest phone call was reaching a crescendo. "I don't care about protocol. I have a meeting with Pentagon procurement I cannot miss. Surely someone here has authority to arrange alternative transport." She had cornered a young airman. Using the full force of her corporate authority on someone who probably made $30,000 a year. The airman maintained professional composure. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but we need to follow proper safety procedures. Do you know who I am?" The woman's voice cut through the terminal. My company supplies aviation systems your Air Force uses. I could make one phone call and... She stopped mid-sentence. Jake felt it before he saw it. That shift in the air. That change in energy. 3 pilots had entered the terminal. Flight suits. Calm confidence. The bearing of people who had been trained to handle crisis. Jake felt himself straighten involuntarily. Muscle memory. The lead pilot, a major with gray threading his dark hair, scanned the terminal with eyes trained to assess threats and opportunities in milliseconds. His gaze passed over the woman, over the complaining passengers, over the young airman. And stopped dead on Jake. Something flickered in the major's expression. Recognition. But that was impossible. Jake didn't know him. Hadn't served with him. Then the major's eyes dropped to Jake's wrist. To the metal band that had shifted during the wait. Just enough visible, just enough to read the engraving. Eagle eye. The major's entire demeanor transformed. He said something quick to his companions. Then he walked directly toward Jake with purpose. Jake felt his heart rate spike. That old fight or flight response. Emma sensed the shift. Moved closer to her dad. The major stopped at respectful distance. His eyes moved from the metal band to Jake's face and back. When he spoke, his voice carried respect that made the entire terminal go quiet. Sir, I don't mean to intrude, but that call sign on your wrist, is it yours, or are you wearing someone's memorial band? The question hung in the air. Respectful. Direct. Giving Jake the option to deflect. The terminal had gone silent. The woman had stopped mid-complaint. The young airman was staring. Jake's throat felt like sandpaper. He hadn't claimed that identity aloud in 4 years. Hadn't said those words since the day they handed him discharge papers and told him broken men couldn't be trusted with jets. But something about this moment, standing on military ground with his daughter beside him and that F-22 visible through the window, made lying feel like the worst kind of betrayal. His voice came out rough. Scarred by disuse. It's mine. 2 words, simple. True. Eagle eye. The major's face transformed. Respect, something deeper. He straightened to attention and saluted. Jake's hand came up slowly. 4 years of civilian life fought against 12 years of training. But training won. His return salute was automatic. Precise. Muscle memory taking over where conscious thought faltered. The terminal had become something else entirely. No longer civilian space, but military territory, governed by different rules. The major held his salute for a long moment before lowering his hand. Sir, it's an honor. The major's voice carried weight. I'm Major Tom Castellano. This is Captain Jennifer Park and Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Wade. The captain looked like she was seeing a legend step out of a history book. The lieutenant colonel had gone very still, his eyes sharp with recognition. I flew training missions based on your tactics, sir, Major Castellano continued. The defensive maneuver you developed, the Eagle turn, it's required study at Nellis. You saved countless pilots with that innovation. The name hit Jake like a physical blow. The Eagle turn, his signature move, the maneuver that had made him famous in fighter pilot circles. Emma pressed against her father's leg, confused by what was happening but understanding it was important. Jake's throat worked. I appreciate that, Major. What brings you to Davis, sir? Captain Park spoke up. Jake gestured vaguely toward the terminal. Flight had mechanical issues. We're waiting to continue to Denver. The pilots exchanged glances. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Sir, Major Castellano said. Would you and your daughter like to see the flight line? We have about an hour before our next brief. Some of the squadron would appreciate meeting you. It was phrased as a question, but Jake heard the deeper offer. A temporary return to the world he had left. A chance to show Emma who her father used to be. Jake looked down at his daughter. Emma was staring up at him with wonder and confusion. Trying to piece together why these pilots were treating her dad who fixed cars and shopped at Goodwill, like someone important. Want to see a real fighter jet up close, Emma? Emma's response was immediate. Emphatic. Yes. The pilots smiled. That genuine warmth military personnel reserved for their own and for children. Outstanding, Major Castellano said. He turned to his companions. Park, Radio Martinez. Tell her we're bringing a VIP to the flight line. Copy that, sir. As they moved toward the exit, Jake heard the woman's voice behind him. Shrill. Demanding. Wait, I need to speak with someone about transportation. This is unacceptable. I have critical meetings. The young airman she had been berating looked past her. Watching Jake leave with the pilots. Something in his expression had changed. He had seen the salute. Heard the respect in the major's voice. When he turned back to the woman, his professional courtesy had cooled considerably. Ma'am, I'll see what I can find out. But you'll need to wait like everyone else. The heat outside was brutal. Jake felt it immediately. That Arizona sun that could cook you through your clothes. But underneath the discomfort was something else. The smell of jet fuel, hot concrete, hydraulic fluid, the scent of purpose. Emma bounced on her toes, exhaustion forgotten. Dad, we're really going to see the planes. Really, baby. Captain Park jogged ahead, speaking into her radio. Jake caught fragments. Eagle Eye. Yes, the Eagle Eye. 6-year-old daughter. Copy that. The F-22 was more impressive up close. Angular lines designed to defeat radar. A shape that promised death to enemies and salvation to allies. The ground crew paused their work as the pilots approached with Jake and Emma. The crew chief, a woman in her 40s with sergeant stripes and a name tape reading Martinez, looked up from her checklist. She studied Jake for a long moment. Taking in the worn clothes. The careful way he held himself. The metal band on his wrist. Then she set down her clipboard and walked over. Eagle Eye. It wasn't a question. Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. Martinez's expression shifted into something deeper. Chief Master Sergeant Lisa Martinez. I was crew chief for tail number 633 during the Iraqi deployment. She paused. You brought her back with hydraulics failing and half the right wing damaged. I thought it was impossible, sir. The memory rushed back. Cockpit alarms screaming, Rebecca on the radio, talking him through it because she could read his flying better than anyone. For crew members' lives depending on him fighting physics and winning. When he had finally touched down, surrounded by emergency vehicles, he had sat in the cockpit, unable to move. Rebecca had climbed up and pulled him out herself. Held him while he shook. 3 months later, she was gone. Jake forced the words out. You kept that bird flying, Chief. I was just steering. Martinez shook her head. With respect, sir, that's not how I remember it. You made that plane do things it wasn't designed to do. She looked at Emma. This your daughter? Yes, ma'am. Emma. Martinez crouched to Emma's level. You like jets, kiddo? Emma nodded, speechless. This one's special. Tail number 633. She gestured to the aircraft behind her. Your dad flew this exact plane. Saved a lot of lives in it, too. Emma's eyes went huge. She looked at her father, then back at Martinez, then at the F-22. My dad flew this one. He really did. Can I see inside? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Martinez stood. Want to see the cockpit? The answer was written all over Emma's face. Martinez's team pulled over a maintenance ladder. Major Castellano helped lift Emma onto the first rung. "Take it slow, baby. We've got you," Jake said. Emma climbed with careful determination, her father's hand steady on her back. The canopy was open for maintenance. Emma disappeared into the cockpit like she was entering a cathedral. Jake followed. His body remembering every handhold, the exact placement of hands and feet. The way the cockpit wrapped around you, making you part of the machine. Emma was touching everything. The stick, the throttle. The display screens. Her hands were reverent. "Dad," Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "You really flew this?" Jake settled on the cockpit edge. Close enough for safety. Far enough to let his daughter explore. "Yeah, baby. I really did." "Were you scared?" The question every child asks. The one that deserves truth. Terrified every single time. But being scared doesn't mean you don't do the thing. It means you do it anyway. Because people are counting on you. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, "Like how you take care of me even when it's hard." Jake felt his throat close. Exactly like that. Below them, more people had gathered. Other pilots, maintenance crews. Word was spreading. Eagle Eye was here. The woman from the plane had followed them onto the tarmac. Keeping her distance but unable to look away. She stood there in her business suit, completely out of place in this environment. Jake could see it on her face. The recognition that money meant nothing here. That the value system she had built her life on didn't translate. That she had spent 2 hours treating someone like garbage who these people honored. Martinez called up. "Sir, Colonel Patterson wants to know if you'll come to the ready room. The squadron would like to meet you." Jake looked at his daughter. At the joy on Emma's face. At the opportunity to show his little girl something true about who her father had been. "We'll be right down, Chief." They climbed down carefully. Emma was talking a mile a minute. "Dad, that was so cool. The controls and the screens and everything. You really knew how to fly all that?" "I did, baby." "That's so awesome." Lieutenant Colonel Wade stepped forward. "Sir, if you'll follow me. It's just a short walk." The walk to the ready room felt like traveling backward through time. Jake's feet found paths his mind had forgotten. Emma held his hand, still bouncing with excitement. The toy airplane was forgotten in her pocket. She had seen the real thing now. The ready room doors opened and heads turned. Maybe 15 pilots inside. Some in flight suits preparing for missions. Others in duty uniforms. Different ages, different ranks. But all sharing that particular bearing of people trained to handle the impossible. "Attention," someone called. The room snapped to focus with military precision. Lieutenant Colonel Wade held up a hand. "At ease. Everyone, this is Jake Miller. Call sign Eagle Eye. Some of you have studied his missions. All of you have benefited from his tactical innovations." The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. A young lieutenant raised his hand tentatively. "Sir, is it true you completed Red Flag with a 43-0 kill ratio?" Jake blinked. He hadn't thought about that exercise in years. 43-0. But that was a different world. A different time. "Sir," a captain stood up. She was maybe 28. Sharp eyes. Pilot's confidence. "The defensive maneuver you developed, the eagle turn, it saved my life last year. Hydraulic failure during training. My instructor made me practice it until I could do it in my sleep. When my systems failed, muscle memory took over." She came to attention. Saluted. "Thank you, sir." Jake felt something crack inside him. A dam he had built from grief and shame and the conviction that he had failed by surviving when Rebecca hadn't. Others began standing. One by one. Until the entire room was at attention. Emma pressed against her father's leg. Overwhelmed but understanding something important was happening. I was just doing my job, Jake managed. Same as all of you. Major Castellano shook his head. Sir, that's exactly the point. You did your job better than anyone thought possible. Then you walked away when you had to. And you're still standing. Still raising that beautiful girl. That's not failure, sir. That's victory. The words landed like a fighter jet touching down after a long mission. Solid, real, true. A colonel entered. His presence shifting the atmosphere from informal to official. Someone briefed him quickly. His expression transformed to respect. He crossed to Jake, hand extended. Colonel David Patterson. Squadron Commander. It's an honor, Captain Miller. Jake shook his hand, noting the colonel used his rank despite civilian clothes. Just Jake is fine, sir. I'm not active anymore. Patterson shook his head firmly. Once a captain, always a captain. That doesn't change. He glanced down at Emma. This your daughter? Emma. She's 6. Patterson crouched to Emma's level. Want to be a pilot like your dad? Emma nodded, then added firmly, like my dad and my mom. Patterson's expression flickered with understanding. Your mom was a pilot too. Jake's hand tightened on Emma's shoulder. Captain Rebecca Miller. She died in a training accident 4 years ago. The room's energy shifted. Celebration giving way to something more solemn. These people understood loss in their bones. They had all known someone who didn't come back. Patterson stood slowly. His bearing formal. Captain Miller pioneered electronic warfare protocols we still use. Her work saved countless lives. I'm sorry for your loss. The Air Force lost 2 exceptional officers that day. The recognition washed over Jake. Not just of Rebecca's death, but of his survival. Of the fact that he had chosen to live instead of dying slowly behind a desk. Patterson made a decision. Captain Miller, would you speak to my pilots? Share perspective that doesn't come from training manuals. Jake hesitated. In the air, he had procedures. Protocols. Here, he just had his truth. I'm not sure what I could tell them, sir. Tell them about after, Patterson said. After the career ends and you have to figure out who you are when flying isn't an option. They need to see there's an after. And that it's worth fighting for. Emma settled into a chair, clutching her toy jet. Jake stood at the front of the room. 20 pairs of eyes watching him. I never wanted to stop flying. His voice came out rough. I left because nightmares got so bad I couldn't trust myself in a cockpit. Because panic attacks made me a liability. Because losing Rebecca broke something in me that medical discharge papers made official. The room was silent. No judgment. Just attention. I blamed myself. Even though the accident review said I couldn't have prevented it. She was doing a routine training flight. The aircraft malfunctioned. She did everything right. And she still died. Jake's voice cracked. He didn't try to hide it. For 6 months after, I couldn't sleep. Couldn't look at the sky without seeing her jet going down. I had a choice. Stay in. Ride a desk. Watch others do what I loved. Or leave. Try to build something new. Focus on my daughter. He looked at Emma. I chose her. I chose being present over being important. Some days that choice feels like the hardest mission I ever flew. He let that reality hang in the air. I work as a mechanic now. Fix cars for $15 an hour. Live in an apartment where the heat doesn't always work. Shop at thrift stores. Sometimes we eat cereal for dinner. Major Castellano started to object, but Jake held up a hand. By every measure society uses, I'm a failure. I lost my career. Lost respect. Lost the identity I had built my entire adult life around. He looked around the room at the young faces. The eager pilots. The ones who still believed they were invincible. But here's what I learned. Failure is just life viewed from the wrong angle. I might have lost my career, but I gained being there when Emma takes her first steps into whatever future she chooses. I might have lost respect from people who only value you for what you do, but I gained the ability to see who someone really is beneath surface judgments. He gestured to Emma. Hold on to this as long as you can. Fly every mission like it's your last, because one day it will be. But remember, there's life after flying. It's not easier. Not what I would choose if the world gave me different options. But it's worth it. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it comes with a co-pilot who makes the turbulence worthwhile. Applause broke out. Not polite ceremony. But genuine appreciation. As the applause faded, Colonel Patterson stepped forward. Captain Miller, I'd like to make you an offer. We have a civilian consultant program for pilots who've left active duty but still have expertise we need. You would help with tactical development. Maybe run scenarios with newer pilots. Part-time, flexible around your current job and your daughter's schedule. Patterson's voice was firm. We need people who've lived it. Who can teach from experience, not just theory. Interested? Jake felt the offer land. Solid, real, possible. Not flying. Would never be flying again. But a way back into the world he loved. Recognition that his knowledge still had value. He thought about Emma. About providing better than broken heat and cereal dinners. He thought about Rebecca. About what she would say. She would tell him to take it. To stop punishing himself with poverty because he had survived when she hadn't. Yes, sir. I'm interested. Patterson's smile was genuine. Outstanding. We'll get the paperwork started. The room gradually returned to normal operations. But pilots kept approaching Jake. Introducing themselves. Sharing stories about how his innovations had filtered through their training. A young airman shook his hand. Sir, your mission recordings, we watched them in advanced training. The way you read enemy formations, anticipated their moves 3 steps ahead. It's like watching someone speak a different language. Jake felt something loosening in his chest. The tight knot of shame and inadequacy he had carried for 4 years. These people saw a value he had convinced himself didn't exist anymore. Martinez appeared in the doorway. Sir, your flight's been cleared. They're boarding in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. That's all they had left in this world before returning to the civilian one. Patterson shook Jake's hand again. We'll be in touch within 48 hours. And Captain, thank you. For your service, for your sacrifice. For showing these pilots what strength really looks like. The walk back to the terminal felt different. Jake wasn't invisible anymore. Wasn't the man in oil-stained clothes people dismissed. He was eagle-eye. A call sign that meant something. Emma held his hand. Quiet now. Processing everything she had learned about her father in the last 2 hours. The terminal came into view. And there, standing near the entrance, was the woman from the plane. She had been waiting. Her phone was nowhere in sight. Her armor of importance had cracked, revealing something raw underneath. As Jake and Emma approached, she stepped forward. Her voice had lost its edge entirely. Mr. Miller. I owe you an apology. Jake stopped. Emma pressed closer to her father's side, remembering the woman's earlier cruelty. The woman continued, words clearly difficult. I judged you based on superficial things. Your clothes, your circumstances. I was cruel to you and your daughter without cause. I was wrong. It was a corporate apology. Rehearsed, designed to mitigate liability. But underneath it, Jake heard something real. Actual shame, actual recognition of harm. "You didn't know," he said simply. "That's not an excuse. I should have treated you with basic human decency regardless of who you were or what you wore. I made assumptions. I was wrong." She looked at Emma. "I'm sorry I made you feel bad about your toy. It's clear now it means something special to you." Emma didn't respond. Just held her airplane closer. The gate agent's voice crackled over the PA, "Flight 2847 to Denver is now boarding. All passengers, please proceed to Gate 3. The woman pulled out a business card. "My company is always looking for consultants with real operational experience. If you're interested, call me. The pay is substantially more than $15 an hour." She handed him the card. Didn't wait for a response. Just turned and walked toward the gate. Emma returned to her father's side. "Is that the mean lady?" Jake looked at the card, then at his daughter. "Yeah, baby. But maybe she's trying to be less mean." It was the kindest interpretation. Possibly more generous than the woman deserved. But Jake had learned that people were complicated. That everyone was fighting battles you couldn't see. That grace was sometimes the hardest and most important thing you could offer. They boarded the plane. Same seats, same leather that cost more than rent. But everything had shifted. The flight attendant smiled warmly. "Welcome back. I heard you got to see some amazing planes." "We did." Emma was glowing. "My dad flew them. Real F-22s. That's wonderful." Her smile was genuine now. "Your dad must be pretty special." "He is," Emma said with absolute certainty. Jake felt his eyes sting. He blinked hard. Focused on getting settled. The woman was already in her seat. She glanced over once. No contempt. No judgment. Just acknowledgement. The flight to Denver was smooth. Routine. Everything the first leg should have been. But Jake wasn't the same man who had boarded in Phoenix. Something had shifted. Some weight he had been carrying had been set down. Not all of it. He still had nightmares. Still missed Rebecca with an ache that never quite faded, still struggled with inadequacy and shame. But now he also had this, recognition that his worth wasn't determined by his paycheck. That the man he had been wasn't erased by the circumstances he lived in now. That eagle eye wasn't dead. Just different. Emma dozed against his shoulder, exhausted by excitement. Her toy F-22 was clutched in her hand, but looser now. She had seen the real thing. Touched it, understood it better. Jake looked out the window at clouds and sky. His domain once, foreign territory now. But maybe that was okay. Maybe you could lose something precious and still build a life worth living. Maybe you could fail by one measure and succeed by another. Maybe you could be broken and whole at the same time. The metal band on his wrist caught light. It didn't define him anymore. But it was part of him. A chapter in a story still being written. The landing in Denver was perfect. Smooth. Professional. Everything you wanted from a pilot who knew their craft. They collected their single duffel from baggage claim. Made their way to long-term parking. Jake's truck was 12 years old. Repaired transmission, Faith holding it together. It started on the second try. "Dad," Emma was awake now. Arranging her jet on the dashboard. "Can we go back there sometime? To see the planes?" Jake thought about Colonel Patterson's offer. About consulting work, about returning to Davis not as a visitor, but as someone who belonged. "Yeah, baby. I think we can." The drive home took 90 minutes. Their apartment complex was beige and fading. But it was home. Jake carried Emma upstairs. One arm around his daughter, the duffel over his other shoulder. Their apartment was exactly as they had left it. Small. Clean. Furniture from thrift stores. But home. He tucked Emma into bed. Still mostly dressed, too tired for pajamas. "Dad," Emma's voice was sleepy. "Those pilots really respect you. They respect what I used to do, baby." "No." Emma's eyes were serious. Rebecca's eyes. "They respect you. Who you are now. I could tell." Jake felt his throat tighten. "Get some sleep, baby. Big day tomorrow." "Love you, Dad." "Love you too." In the living room, Jake sat on the sagging couch. Pulled out his phone. 2 missed calls from his boss at Peterson's Auto. Probably wondering why he had missed his shift. A text from his landlord about rent. Nothing from anyone who had called just to check on him. He looked at the woman's business card. Then at the metal band on his wrist. Tomorrow he would call Colonel Patterson. Start the paperwork for consulting work. Tomorrow he would face his boss. Explain the absence. Tomorrow he would begin building something new from the pieces of today. Tonight he was just tired. Sleep found him on the couch. His phone slipped from his hand. He dreamed of flying. But not nightmares. In this dream, he was teaching Emma to handle controls. Small hands on the stick while Jake's hands hovered nearby, ready but not taking over. Rebecca was there too. Not as a ghost, but as presence. Smiling, proud. The sky was clear and infinite. The jet responded to Emma's touch like it had been waiting for her. When Jake woke 3 hours later, the dream clung like morning mist. Dissipating slowly but leaving the sense that maybe the future didn't have to be defined only by loss. Maybe it could be defined by what came next. By choices made from here forward. By refusal to let one chapter's ending dictate the entire book's worth. He looked at the metal band on his wrist. The call sign meant something different now. Not a memorial to who he had been, but a reminder that identity could expand rather than contract. That skills learned in one arena could transfer to another. That the end of one mission simply meant the beginning of the next. Jake stood. Covered Emma with a blanket, looked around their small apartment. It wasn't much. But it was theirs. And tomorrow they would start building something more. Not because they had to prove anything to anyone. But because they deserved it. Because broken things could be repaired. Because sometimes the dirtiest hands belonged to the men who had saved the most lives. And because love, whether for a daughter, a memory, or a future, was always worth fighting for. Always.